Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Joree Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Joree is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Joree.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Journey Forward with Joree Rose. I wanted to share with you about the recent retreat that I led. I took a group of women to Miraval in Tucson, Arizona. And Miraval is one of my most absolute favorite places. My first time that I went there, it was a really powerful time in my life. I had gotten divorced the summer before, and I had been dating someone for a few months after my divorce, and we had just broken up. And the emotions I was feeling from that breakup was really, I think, some older emotions from my divorce and going through the grief of my marriage. And I ended up coming home from a speaking engagement and rerouting my way to end up at Miraval, where I spent 3 days by myself and had a beautifully transforming, peaceful, and mindful experience. And it was exactly what I needed at that particular point in time back in 2015 to be in a space that is so intentional in every aspect. And it gave me a soft place to land, being both alone and yet not feeling alone, and allowing where I was at in my own journey to have an environment that was supportive of growth and transformation and mindfulness. And when I was there back in 2015, I said to myself, I want to come back and lead retreats here. And it took a couple of years for that dream to manifest. And my first retreat that I led at Miraval was in 2018. And it was amazing because I have found my biggest growth, my biggest transformations didn't occur in therapy or in a meditation class or in a mindfulness class. And all those were really, really, really important aspects of my journey and my healing and my growth and my transformations. But the real growth, like the lasting growth, the ones that I was able to harness for days and weeks and months and even years to come, occurred while being on retreat. And so I knew that it was a really big part of my business plans and my intentions as a therapist and as a mindfulness teacher to create that space for other people. Because so much of even the way that I am as a therapist is, and so much of the way that I teach mindfulness is I ask myself, what is the therapist I would have needed or wanted? And I loved my therapist, don't get me wrong, this isn't about that, but I really look to, well, if I needed these tools or this compassion or this vulnerability from this other person, then I guess I'm not the only one who would have needed these things. So I tend to show up in my professional life, like I said, as a therapist and as a mindfulness teacher and a meditation teacher, by asking myself the question, what was it I was needing? Because I know I'm not the only one. And it also helps me continue to show up from a place of real authenticity because I'm fully in alignment with myself in these types of situations. But getting back to retreat. So I really had it as part of my creative and unfolding professional journey to create the space outside of a particular just 1 hour therapy session or outside of a mindfulness class where I could guide mostly women. It's my intention to do couples retreat with John as well, but I've focused on women to consciously create the space for transformation to occur. And it's a real intentional space that gets created. And from the beginning, when I led my first retreat at Miraval, I decided to not do it just over a weekend. I've always done the retreats generally like on a Sunday through a Wednesday. And I've done this on purpose, knowing it was actually harder for women to get away during the week than it would have been just to go away on a weekend. And I did this intentionally because the retreat begins the moment you book it, right? I remember when I was on my first 7-day retreat with John Kabat-Zinn, who's like the grandfather of mindfulness in the Western world, as I like to call him. He would always say, we're always in practice. We're not just practicing these mindful tools when we're sitting in a session on a meditation cushion, or we're in a guided, a body scan, or we're being taught about different aspects of mindfulness. Like, we are still in practice when you get up and go to the bathroom. We are still in practice when you're traveling to and from the retreat. We are still in practice during our meals. And so truly, the retreat begins, the intention in which someone signs up for it begins the moment they make the decision to go. And I wanted to create the space intentionally for women to consciously choose themselves ahead of their other responsibilities. So by asking women to join me over the course of 3 weekdays is making the commitment to themselves to say, I am worthy enough to miss work. I am worthy enough to ask for help for my kids to get to and from school and any of their after school commitments. Because women especially so often, out of their true love for those around them and to their responsibilities that they, I would say, mostly do by choice, but nonetheless are responsibilities and commitments, put themselves last. And we tend to take care of our kids first, take care of the home, take care of the family, attend to the commitments, and we end up last on that totem pole of attending to and to taking care of. And then no wonder we feel depleted and tired and exhausted and overwhelmed, and our patience is short and our irritation can get high because we're not often or easily making the commitment to give that time to ourselves. So from that very first retreat that I led, it was always majority of the time during the week. So women could decide from that very moment they signed up, this is about taking care of me, that I can have the courage and the freedom to ask for help, even if it's hard, that I can let go of things looking at home like how I would normally do it and let it be okay that it's being done in a different way. And these things are really, really hard for women. And it's the space I'm trying to create even before we even get to being in a group together at our retreat site. So I've done retreats in 2018, 2019, I did 2 of them. Obviously, I had a couple planned for 2020 that had to get canceled. So this was the first time being back together in that space, first time being back at Miraval since COVID, first time really seeing a lot of these women in person. Like, there was so much that I was already feeling before we even arrived. And being the mindful person that I am and the intentions in which I hold towards mindfulness, it's always a question of how can I hold the space for the simultaneous desire to want to have it look a certain way, right? I have really clear intentions of what I want to have unfold. I have really clear ideas in my mind of what I want it to look like, what I want to accomplish. And yet the paradox of setting that intention and then letting it go. The paradox of not grasping so tightly to the vision in my mind and allowing what's going to unfold and trust the unfolding process. Trust that what is going to unfold is exactly what is meant to unfold and will be the reason that we are all sharing in this joint experience. So there's a lot that I put into this retreat, especially knowing we're all coming out of, but still in the midst of COVID. We all haven't traveled necessarily yet. We haven't been in groups yet. And just being really intentional about what that space was going to look and feel like. But also I had to get really clear on what was the transformation I was hoping for women to experience? What was the takeaway that I was wanting them to really access during this 3.5 days of intentional mindful time. And, the title of it was Renew and Recharge Your Spirit, which sounded beautiful, but I think had a lot of iterations in my mind. And what it really became was an opportunity to shatter our narratives. And so as you're listening to this episode right now, I really invite you to consider, what are the narratives that you are holding that likely originated at some previous time in your life, that may have been originated from a wound, from a trauma, from a pain point, in which we consciously or unconsciously, probably more likely unconsciously, developed this narrative about ourselves, about how we show up in the world, about who we are supposed to be, about what our relationships are supposed to look like, about our self-worth, about our abilities or capabilities. So we likely formed this narrative that maybe even perhaps it was formed from someone telling us something. You're not good enough, or you don't know how to handle money, or you aren't responsible, or you're not worthy enough to achieve what you want to achieve, or you have depression and therefore are difficult to be around. I mean, there's all sorts of types of narratives that we are told and then we hold on to, or that we cultivate in an effort to self-protect. Whatever the reason of the cultivation of our own narrative, I'm guessing that there's so much of your narrative that doesn't serve you. And that yet you hold on to this because it's part of your identity. It's part of what you know to be true at some point in your life. But you also know that it's holding you back, and it's getting in the way, and it's preventing you from feeling happy or grounded or settled in your mind and body. Or perhaps it's this narrative is getting in the way of growth, whether that's developing a business or deeper relationships, or navigating through hardships in your life, like transitions around whether it's divorce or a loved one dying or a career shift, right? So these narratives get in our way. We hold on to them. They prevent us from getting us where we want to be. And yet they still seem to be this truth that we can't let go of. So this Renew and Recharge Your Spirit ultimately became an opportunity to identify and then shatter the narrative. And doing this experientially is so powerful, which is, again, why I love retreat, because it gives us the time and space to embody and take in an experience, to make it experiential rather than cognitive, or allows us to then simmer in that juiciness of the emotion, even when it's hard, because you're not alone. You're doing it in the safety and security of other people who, through the beauty of the space we've created, was super vulnerable and accepting. And when we can tap into our own vulnerability in a curated space of acceptance and compassion and being non-judgmental, then it begins to shift. It begins to shift our ability around how we see ourselves and how we can see others. And this is what was able to unfold in this retreat. It was so amazing to set this intention that I had, and then to watch it unfold in a way that even I couldn't have imagined. And so, what does that look like? What does it look like to shatter your narrative? Well, like I said, it just has to start with partly identifying what is the narrative that is not working for me. But how do you let go of that? Well, we did it through a couple of different embodied practices. If you follow me on social media, you might have seen me post some photos. The embodied challenge courses that Miraval offers are so perfect for working through our shit. And I was afraid that these women who came with me were going to be upset with me for choosing the hardest, what I believe to be the hardest of the challenge courses, which is climbing a 35-foot pole. And then when you get to the top of the pole, there is a very small 2-foot by 1-foot delaminated due to the recent rains. There was chipping wood pieces and little shingles up there, a delaminated platform in which we had to maneuver our way from the pole onto the platform with nothing to hold on to. Now you're harnessed so you can't fall, or if you fall, you're not gonna, get injured. You're gonna get caught and lowered down. But working out our shit up there of the thought of, I can't do this. This is hard. This is scary. I don't like this. And then doing it anyways. That is one of the ways that we broke through those narratives. And so you climb up onto the pole, you stand on this delaminated platform, you get this amazing view of the mountains and the desert. And then the second person climbs up. And as they climb up, it's hard for the person standing on the top because it's wobbly and it's nothing to hold on to. And then they've got to maneuver their way from the pole onto the platform. And there's a lot of negotiation of how to accommodate space and fearing taking up too much space and not having enough space. And for women, what that feels like to embody an insecurity of, am I taking up too much space? Or am I trying to over accommodate for somebody else because I don't feel worthy of this space? Like, there's so much wisdom in this practice. And then physically, just how do we maneuver this? How do we communicate through this? And everyone did it. And doesn't mean it was easy, and they did it. And with each experience, there was different wisdom to pull out of it, whether it was noticing the tendency to externalize the challenge to someone else versus being in it yourself, or noticing, like, again, the fear of taking up space, or being overly polite in, not being assertive for your needs, or having an understanding of how to move in relationship to another, to literally be in a dance with somebody in how we can negotiate our needs, our language, our communication, our physical space, or literally how we lift each other up, how we can rely on support of another person, especially another woman, to be vulnerable with, to say, I need you, and to be received with, I'm here for you. And then once you get to the top of the platform and you find your breath and, moving the energy through your body in a way to be present, you then jump off. And it was a really amazing experience to witness. And yet I had this fascinating experience of, I'm here guiding these women, and yet I'm still in it. Right. So this paradox within my own personal experience of I'm the teacher here, but I'm also the student, because I'm still doing the practices. I am still embodying my narrative, my own fears, and being vulnerable to my group to say, yes, I'm still human. I'm not climbing up this pole with like super ease and even enjoyment. Like, it was scary as hell. And my intention when I did it was to slow down and to enjoy the process, because this is something I'm going to talk about at the end, but I have been needing to slow down. Now, I've been hearing this for years and years and years, and it's no surprise I'm a mindfulness teacher, because I am teaching the things that I most need to practice. And practicing and teaching them does not mean I'm immune from still getting stuck. And I crack up. I even once got a speeding ticket while on the way to teach a mindfulness class. Like, how ironic is that? And yet these are the tools that I most need. So again, this was one of the first experiences of the retreat in which I was straddling these different worlds of guiding it and yet being in it. And I allowed myself to be both, and not to have to try to pretend to not be in it, and to feel what I was feeling and feel the fear and feel the emotion and be vulnerable to my group. Because even the way I show up as a therapist is I'm super vulnerable as a therapist, because if I can't be vulnerable and role model vulnerability, then what am I actually guiding my clients in? So it's a very intentional way for me to be showing up in the work that I do. I would never want to presume I am above the human emotion of fear or anxiety or doubt or insecurity. I just simply name it along the way. And I took my time climbing up that pole, and I took my time getting grounded in my breath and not trying to just rush it. And I took my time settling into what it feels like to slow down, especially when the slowing down is really uncomfortable because, energy, when an object of motion stays in motion, right? It's a simple scientific belief in kinetic energy, and yet it takes effort to slow down. And when we slow down, there can be fear of losing our trajectory or fear of losing our balance. And yet it's a reminder I keep getting. And I kept practicing it. So that was the first way of, kind of embodying how to notice our narrative of I can't slow down and shattering it to yes, I can, and it's still hard. And there were so many different narratives that women were working out up there. And we continued this process through our time together. And that morning we did our challenge course, and then we got a couple of hours to just take some self-care time and spa treatments and pool time. And then our afternoon session that day was practicing the Japanese art of kintsugi. And the Japanese art of kintsugi is that we repair our cracks with gold. And so it's literally the art of repairing ceramics, repairing a broken crack in a piece of a pottery, like a bowl or a plate or a cup, and filling those cracks with gold, because the cracks actually make us stronger and make us more beautiful. And just like that beautiful Leonard Cohen quote, the cracks are where the light gets in. And so I bought bowls and plates and brought a hammer, and we named the narrative that we were breaking, that we were shattering. And each woman broke a piece of pottery. So that way we could then put it back together, and put it back together intentionally, filling those cracks with gold, recognizing that our wounds do not define us, but our strengths come from those pain points and how we've gotten through it. And recognizing that we are stronger than we believe, and that we can tap into the beauty even of our pain as a point of our humanness, as a point of our own compassion, and really as a root marker as a sign for our growth. So, the breaking of the narrative does not happen overnight, and that healing and that journey is not a one and done. And this is something that I name for so many of my clients, because even as we went through the process of our retreat, and even as we went through the process of breaking this narrative, there is this sense of, oh, okay, I broke it. I'm healed now. I'm all better. And it's never a one and done. And so, we went on this journey of kind of this rise and this fall of our experience and our emotion and our interacting with our narratives. And it was interspersed with a lot of laughter and a lot of fun and a lot of friendships being formed, combined with a lot of crying and vulnerability and exposing our true selves. Because in this curated space, there is a trust and a safety to say, if I expose myself, you're not going to use that against me. If I allow you to see my cracks inside, will you accept me? And again, this is the beauty of retreat. This is the beauty of being in a space that is intentional for healing that we don't get in our everyday lives. And I can't tell you how many times the women in this experience commented on, I've never felt women to feel so supportive before, because in our everyday lives, there's judgments, there's doubts, there's fears, there's insecurities. And yet that's just kind of the roles that we're playing in the conditioning of our society. And when we can step out of that and tap into our humanness, there's beauty underneath that. Now, the key is to how do we step back into our everyday lives, knowing that not everyone is going to be so receptive to our vulnerability. And, with that re-entry into everyday life, part of the reminder that I will guide my attendees in remembering is at least remember that the possibility existed. Harness that possibility as the reminder that it may not be permanent and it existed. And that's all you need to know. Because even if for that moment you knew it was possible, then you can harness that and you can look for the opportunities in which we can embrace that again. So that's one piece I wanted to share. But, it was so interesting as we continue to guide through the course of our time together and different practices that I offered. Even when we broke the narrative and we shattered the ceramic and we jumped off the pole and it felt like, okay, I'm on the path to healing. I've let that shit go. What happened next was, I invited in another exercise in which we had to acknowledge those pain points again. And it was really easy for some people to feel like, damn it, Joree, why did you bring me back there? I just let it go. I just jumped off the top of the delaminated platform. I just shattered that plate and I'm beginning to fill it with gold. Why did you bring me back there? Well, it was intentional. It's the reminder of our triggers, our wounds. They're going to continue to arise. And the key is to not judge when they do. The key is to remember, okay, I'm human. Here that pain point is again. Here's that old narrative rearing its ugly head. And now I have the option of choosing how to respond differently to that narrative because I have had the embodied practice of shattering it and letting it go. So the healing is not in the belief that it's never going to come back. The true healing is the wisdom of knowing when it comes back, I have tools to draw upon to not let it define me. So every bit of the aspects of what I created was really intentional to allow these women to ride the waves of the ups and the downs of what really is everyday life. The laughter and the joy, right? And even bringing it back to this Buddhist notion of you can't really know the joy until you know the suffering. And it's only when we can accept the suffering can we fully tap into the joy. Like there's so much wisdom in all of this. And we got to just simmer in it because that was what the space was created for. And the final morning, I as I said, I kind of straddle this teacher-student experience of when I'm on retreat, when I'm guiding it, because I'll be honest, there were moments where I was really jealous of all the other women because I was like, man, this is pretty awesome. I want to be on my retreat. Like I want to be on the receiving end of this. And I also wasn't forcing my own Miraval moment to occur because I knew in its own wisdom, whatever I needed, I would find a way of receiving. It would be presented to me. So the final morning, I awoke to receiving a voice message from one of the women, just in deep gratitude, sharing her gratitude for the space that was created for me, for the opportunity, for the wisdom to unfold, for what she gained. And it really drew me to tears. And the words that keep coming back from the very first time I led my first retreat is humbled pride. Like the amount of pride that I feel in my professional journey to have a goal and to see it manifest. But it's so humble. Like I don't take it for granted. I really honor every single person I work with, whether we're, an individual client, whether they show up for one of my courses in my Journey Forward method, whether it is someone who's attended one of my workshops, or whether we're on retreat, I do not take it for granted that they have entrusted me to be part of their journey. And so this humbled pride is continually the words that I say to myself as a reflection for what I feel of pride in myself for accomplishing my goals, pride in the experience that gets, curated and pride for these women in their own trusting of their own selves to show up and to create the space and to do the work, and the trust they have in me to say, well, I don't know that I would do that, but I trust you, Joree. And so therefore I will allow myself to be vulnerable. Like, humbled pride is what keeps coming back again and again and again. So anyhow, that final morning, I woke to this voice message, and it touched me deeply, and it inspired me to get up really early, earlier than I would normally get up, and go explore a little bit, because I recognized that when I've been at Miraval, and I think I've been there 4 or 5 times now, I tend to go where I always go. I tend to stick to the paths that I know. And I realized, wow, it's quite possible that there's a lot more here to explore that I have yet to explore, because I have stayed in what was familiar. So I headed off in a different direction, down a path that ironically was just outside my door, but I went left instead of right. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, by going left, I discovered an entire part of the property I literally didn't know existed. And what I found was a labyrinth. And I've always walked the labyrinth at Miraval, but I didn't know there was a second one. And I was amazed that this second labyrinth, which was quite beautiful, was literally like maybe less than 100 yards from my room every single time I've been there. And I never had even explored to know what was beyond the natural parameters of where I've always been. So like, even in that, before I got the wisdom of what I was there to receive, I already got it. Because I was recognizing, wow, Joree, where am I continuing to do the things that I've always done, thinking that that's enough, and I'm not even open to exploring what's down a different path. So as I stumble upon this labyrinth, and I decide to be very intentional, and I want to set the intention as I walk through it. And this intention of slowing down came back to me. And as I started to take a step into the beginning of the labyrinth, I looked up, and the sun was just peeking up over the mountains, and it was beautiful. It's like maybe, I don't know, 6:45, 7 in the morning. And I thought, you know, I want to record this. So I stepped out of the labyrinth, I set my phone up, and my intention was to set it up on time lapse, because I thought it'd be really neat to watch the sunrise up over the mountain and have me in the foreground walking this labyrinth. And that would be a beautiful memory, and perhaps something I could post and inspire others. In any case, I wanted to capture it. So I set up my phone, and then I decided I wanted to find a rock to be able to put at the center of the labyrinth. There's often offerings that are set up at the center once you get to the middle. And I found a white rock that looked like a heart. And so I picked that up, and I went back to the beginning of the labyrinth, and I took a few deep breaths. And I heard the words of 2 different people who I have met on retreat over the years that have spoken words to me that I've never forgotten. And the first words was my very first John Kabat-Zinn retreat. And the words were slow down. And I told you from the beginning of this episode, this has been a theme for me. And I'm having a hard time learning it. Part of it's hard to slow down because I get excited, because I want to create, because I want to be in service. And slow down continues to be a message. And another message I received while on retreat once was the words, don't force it. And when I was told these words, don't force it, I was really taken off guard. And this was someone who, you know, I was on retreat with, but knew, but didn't like really know all that well. But yet I was able to be seen. And when I first heard the words, don't force it, my immediate response was like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, kind of like a fuck you. Who do you think you are to tell me what to force and not force in my life? And what are you even referring to? And then I thought, holy shit, like, how did you just see right through me? And these words, don't force it, have been in my head since I first heard them, which was, I don't know, back in 2013, maybe. And I recognized the things in my life that I was forcing. And when there was forcing happening, there was no flow. I was trying too hard to either create something that wasn't meant to be, or trying to fit that square in a circle hole, that idea of, where am I placing my own barriers in my own way, and yet thinking it's not manifesting for some external reasons, when really it's me. So the words, don't force it, have really stuck with me. So here I am, my feet are at the center of the labyrinth. I have this rock-shaped heart in my hand. My hands are in a prayer pose. And these words of these two different people come into my mind: slow down, don't force it. And this is my intention for walking the labyrinth. And I had the intention to walk it very intentionally, step by step, moment by moment, being mindful of each movement. And each step became this rhythm of slow down, don't force it, slow down, don't force it. And I got to the last little leg of where you walk into the center of the labyrinth. And I looked at the path I had just traveled, and I had this really bizarre awareness in which I was like, wait a second, I don't actually remember just walking that path. And I'm confused because my whole intention was to not force it and to slow down. And by default, I would have thought that that meant that I was aware and that I was paying attention and that I was present. So if I'm slowing down and if I'm not forcing it, then why did I not feel present for it? How come I actually literally don't remember walking that part of the labyrinth? And I thought, did I make a misstep? I thought, did I cross over a line that I missed? Did I walk the wrong way? What did I do, please? I was asking myself, I don't understand. And I thought, well, again, thank you, universe, for reminding me the message that I most need to receive, which is, even when I think I'm being present, check in again. Because even in the slow down, don't force it that I was saying in my head, I think it was keeping me in my head. And what I was wanting was to be embodied. So I get to the center of the labyrinth, and in the middle of there are these offerings, and there's a stone that says will. And I thought, oh, I really like that. And I placed my heart next to the stone. And I said to myself, I will. And then I said, I have will. And I bowed down to this offering and to this intention. And I thought, okay, I want to be really intentional as I walk out of the labyrinth. And I thought that was my intention going in, but clearly I didn't feel present. So what do I need to do? And I decided I was going to walk out of the labyrinth with my eyes closed. Now, one might imagine, how could you walk in a spiral with your eyes closed? And I was confused on my own intention. And I just trusted. I started to take my steps. My eyes were closed. Every few steps, I kind of squinted and peeked just a little bit just to kind of check, am I on the right path? Am I still in alignment? But then something really beautiful happened. I did slow down, and I wasn't forcing it. And my eyes being closed allowed me to embody my presence. But not only that, with each step that I took, I actually was able to tune into the path in the sand and the dirt that the labyrinth was in I could actually feel the path. And I knew where to make the curve because the path was already unfolded in front of me. I just had to attune to it. There was my Miraval moment. There was my wisdom. I don't need to create the path. I need to turn inward and attune to the path already inside, the path that is right there all along, that I think I'm following by doing all the right steps, but I'm kind of missing all at the same time because I'm so caught up in the message that I'm trying to tell myself, but yet I wasn't fully embodying. And so I did it. I walked out of this labyrinth with my eyes closed, and I felt more connected. And part of that experience, and when my eyes were open, because I was allowing myself to feel it, to trust myself, and to trust the path that is unfolding underneath me and in front of me. Again, that's not to say I didn't open my eyes, this little squint every now and then, but yeah, I needed to realign. I needed to double check, and that's still within my wisdom of my intention. It was such a beautiful moment. And here I was looking for my Miraval moment, for my being the student to receive what the universe was trying to get me to receive. And I got it. I didn't force it, and yet I received it. I set the intention and I allowed the space, and I traveled the path I hadn't been traveling, literally and figuratively, and then literally and figuratively again. And there it was. There was my shattering of my own narrative of what it even means to slow down and don't force it. And then I laughed at the universe again, because the universe has its way of getting you to see what you forget to see. And when I was done, I walked back over to my phone only to discover, this is hysterical, only to discover I actually did not hit the time-lapse button to record my journey in and out of the labyrinth. I actually hit the slow-mo button. And I thought, okay, universe, yes, I need to slow down, because I actually recorded a slow-mo of the sun coming up. And for whatever reason, it didn't even actually record the whole thing. Like, I don't know if there's like a maximum time that the phone by itself will stay on record for slow-mo, and then I thought, okay, Joree, yes, there's another message in this reminder. Stop trying to curate it so much. I was trying to force a recording that I wanted to embody as a personal practice, but I wanted to use for professional social media. And it just felt so fucked up. And I just thought, stop forcing the curation and rather just be it and embody it and share that experience, rather than trying to force the image of what it looked like for someone else to receive, because that's forcing something. And so I'm working on, and this is my practice of, how do I come out of this labyrinth, out of this Miraval journey, out of this experience, out of this transformation, and now how do I embody it in my everyday life? How do I make it happen every single day when I'm doing my work, and when I'm practicing my own tools, and when I'm feeling stuck, and when I'm feeling overwhelmed, and when I'm feeling anxious because I want it all to happen right now, damn it. And that's when I have to slow down, don't force it, close my eyes, trust that the path underneath me is already paved, and I just have to attune to it. And even as I say this out loud, I'm like, okay, Joree, remember this every single day. It's so powerful for me to name it out loud. And I could just like pick apart and unpack all of the wisdom that I need to draw from that. It's powerful. And again, I was like seeking my own Miraval moment and hoping like, when was I going to have it? When was I going to have it? And it happened when I didn't expect it to happen. And I need to remember that as well. And I want you, as you're listening, to remember that as well. Like, we can't force the moments, but we've got to be open to them. And that's the wisdom, right? Like, that's being mindful. And the wisdom to check back in to say, okay, I thought I was being mindful, but was I really? Or maybe previously that's what being mindful and being aware and being present would have meant, but maybe perhaps my definition has shifted and I need to realign with that new intention. Squint my eyes open and check the path and decide, like, am I where I'm supposed to be? So it really culminated into a very powerful final morning with these women, and bringing that wisdom into our final time together and embodying trust and openness and what it really means to slow down and don't force it. And then the challenge of harnessing that now that we're home. I remember my first time coming back from, I did that mindfulness retreat with John Kabat-Zinn, and we were up on a mountain for 7 days. And I remember that drive home, and I normally am a fast driver. I remember being like on the freeway going like 50 miles an hour, thinking, wow, the world is moving so fast around me and I'm still in this slow motion. And I didn't know how to live in both worlds. How do I slow down in a fast-paced world? And, I think my slowing down has been this lifelong challenge for me. And I kind of joke about it that I was literally born in 11 minutes. My mom almost had me in the car on the way to the hospital. And she literally was in the delivery room for 11 minutes. And even now, as I say that out loud, I'm realizing the impact of that, because 11 is one of the master numbers of being in service. And so that actually makes a lot of sense for me. Anyhow, I came into the world really quickly, and I've been doing things fast ever since. So it really is my practice to slow down. And how that looks, I'm not yet sure. I do know I'm exhausted of trying to force it, of trying to force, whether it's the business growth or trying to force my own growth, or trying to force the social media growth, or trying to force the curation of courses and an online presence. And it keeps coming back to being in service and to being like in that professional world, because there's a lot that I want to teach and serve and do and create and cultivate and curate and help and transform. And in its due time, the path is underneath me. It's already been paved. I've got to close my eyes and attune inward to allow it to unfold. So I hope that you've been inspired to both either, whether it's, find what that moment is for you of slowing down, don't forcing it, or even just inspiration in the idea of retreat, of intentionally creating space to shatter your narratives and to do the healing process of filling those cracks with gold, and remembering that your beauty does come from your pain, that there is wisdom in our wounds, and that growth is never a one and done. It's an ongoing path of healing and this trajectory towards wellness. And it's, healing and health and wellness is not being in the absence of stress or overwhelm or anxiety or wounds. The healing and the growth comes in the knowing I've got the tools of what to do with it. So thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you so much for being part of my journey, because even this podcast gives me a space of curating something really intentional, from connections and conversations, but even as a platform to share, because I've got so much inside I want to share. And I love having a community and a platform and a space to be able to be me, to be vulnerable, to be honest, and to be the guide that I seek to be, but to also be my own student and to share that journey with you guys. Slow down, and don't force it. Thanks so much for listening today.
To continue your journey forward, find Joree Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joreerose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.